Well, good morning and welcome to the MAP3 Citizens Advisory Board meeting of September the 27th, 2012. We'll call the meeting to order. First item I want to mention is that I'm not sure that everyone got this email, but I got an email from Nathaniel. I think Zane did as well this week, our member who is serving in Afghanistan. And he had a great report on what was going on in his life and is anxious to keep track of what we're all doing here and is anxious to get back, obviously, to all of us, but maybe even more to his wife and daughter. But anyway, great report from Nathaniel. He's safe and sound, and his work is going well. Second point, we welcome to the Horseshoe our friend David Todd. David is moving up to the Horseshoe today, and Eric, at his request, is closer to the door so that he can. This was a really hard place to escape from on a moment's notice. So Eric is, but we're glad, Eric, that you're still with us and appreciate your help. And David, welcome to the Horseshoe. You've been furnished copies in your packet of the minutes of the August 23rd meeting. Are there additions or corrections? It's been moved that we approve the minutes. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. We have also in our packet item 3, the MAP3 revenue and expenditure report that David's going to inform us about. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have two reports in your packet today. The first one is the period ending June 30th, 2012, which is the end of the last fiscal year. It's in the usual format that you're used to seeing. You can see that for the total year, the revenues were about 5.26% above target, and we had total revenues of $204 million, and we had expenditures of $12 million. The bulk of that expenditure is with park land acquisition. And then moving on to July 31st report. This is obviously just for this 1 month of the fiscal year, 9.94% above target. Total collections of $213 million with expenditures of a little less than $13 million, $12,867,000.
Any questions or discussion? Michael Adams, you've probably studied this carefully.
Well, I haven't, but the only thing I did notice, there's no expenditures listed on the July report.
Yes, sir, that's because it's the first month of the fiscal year and the reports haven't come in yet. So we typically don't have anything there for the year or for that month. You'll see that next month.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Well, the good news is that the revenue is still above projections. Is that the bottom line for us, David?
Yes, sir.
That's great. All right, then let's move to item 4. You have before you in your packet a resolution approving the MAP3 Sidewalk Master Plan. The Trails and Sidewalks Subcommittee met yesterday. David, would you like to start the discussion of this for us?
Yes, sir, I can. We had quite a conversation in the subcommittee yesterday, and after all that discussion, it was decided that the criteria that they developed was still the right criteria, and they have sent this to the advisory board for approval.
Thank you. I want to call on Sue Hooper, who chairs that committee, and give us your thoughts about it, Sue.
Well, we spent quite a bit of time discussing several issues that members had. One issue was the 70 miles. We are worried about that. We want citizens to get 70 miles. We know that we're just getting into the construction phase for sidewalks and everything else, and so we understand how that budget has a midpoint and it gets adjusted. But we also realized that 70 miles was probably projected as 4-foot sidewalks instead of the 5-foot that's the city specification or I understand if it's next to the curb, it's actually 6 feet. And then all of the utilities, the driveways, the stoplights, streetlights, things like that, that need to have some additional moving and expense is going to add up to that. So we were concerned that we were still addressing the needs of our city. And we also were concerned of, did we need to get into addressing needs of each ward? And the bottom line was we finally decided that we did do that because we have the master plan. And in the master plan, there's about 132 miles of designated needs based on our criteria. So they're ranked, they're there, it's a master plan for the city to use. Included in that are several other plans in place, bond issues and things like that. And we did decide that the ranking was the way to go, that we had visited that now about 4 or 5 times, and that we needed to trust the process and move forward. And so we did vote to approve that report, that we did have really good discussion. And it's, we also passed a motion to recommending that City Council look for additional funding to build that 70 miles of sidewalk, because we know there's 70 times 7 miles of sidewalk that needs to be built in the city.
I wanted to point out that our consultant from Smith, Robert Baldschweider, is here, who has been working on this, and if any of the members have a question, you'd be available, I guess, to help us, right? And so I want to open it up now to make sure that you will recall that we've approved this once. We sent it to the council. They have asked the subcommittee to review it again. That's what has taken place. They have reviewed it. So now it's back before us to approve. And so this is a chance for any of you to ask any questions you'd like to. Mike?
Is there any change in this report from the one that was approved last week? Or
Yes,
last night?
actually there is a slight change. When we had the first report, we really did a conservative estimate on the cost expense. So this time we moved that up from 20, is it 25?
25 and a half.
To now it's 30, 25 to, you go ahead, David.
It went from 26 to about 36.
Miles?
Yes, and that's based on the estimates for a very conservative estimate, which were more of the higher bids, and then going all the way down and taking what we've seen as low bids on projects like this. And now we have a range that we think that will be between 26 and 36 miles.
Now we're putting forth 36 miles worth of sidewalks for the MAPS money.
Well, it's always going to just depend on how the bids come back, obviously.
Yes.
Right, so that's where we believe we are right now with the available money.
I know that one of the comments, and I think Sue just alluded to it too, was that the original estimate was based on 4-foot wide sidewalks, and now we're looking at 5-foot wide. Could you kind of tell us what exactly is the standard and why we've changed that, and if it's, I guess, revocable?
Well, the city requires 5-foot sidewalks on arterial streets if it's away from the curb, and if it's against...
Is that a new requirement?
It's reasonably new. It's not brand new, but it's fairly new. Now, the subdivision regulations allow 4-foot sidewalks within subdivisions and non-arterial streets. But if the sidewalk is against the street, then it's 6 feet for safety reasons. Some of the estimates were made just not knowing where the locations of these sidewalks were. They were just estimates, you know. But as we get along and identifying these exact locations, some of the more complicated issues come up, and it's driven the cost up a bit.
So is the 5-foot chiseled in stone, I guess, or are there circumstances where it seems to me like a 4-foot sidewalk would be better than no sidewalk in a lot of situations? So is there opportunities there maybe to get a few more miles by building narrower sidewalks?
The city's policy is 5-foot sidewalks, and that's what they require developers and everybody else to do. So it's really, my opinion, that's what we should be doing also.
I'd just like to add to that, and Mike, if we begin to go back now to 4, then we start cutting out some of the people with handicaps and access to those areas. So
But they don't have access, no one has access now with no sidewalk.
Well, is it better to have no or something that they
That's the
can't
question.
use? And
Yeah.
so.
Mike Dover?
Yes. Wrong line. Some of you may recall at the last advisory board meeting, we had a discussion about a resolution that we, as an advisory board, would send to the council asking them to take another look at the funding for that. And it's in the minutes from the last meeting, and this may be or may not be germane in terms of the issue that we're specifically talking about in terms of the resolution to consider from the subcommittee. Having said that, I think it's an appropriate time to bring up again. I asked the staff if we could come up, help us find the wording for a resolution that we would also, as a body, I think that, assuming that if we all agree, I think that would send even a stronger message that we also reiterate that we would ask the council to take another look at the funding of the sidewalks, 70 miles. You know, first of all, in terms of, relatively speaking, in terms of the dollars, we're not talking, compared to other projects, we're not talking about a whole lot of money compared to other projects. But I think more importantly, what we're talking about here is talking about 26 to 36 miles. In no other project are we looking at literally half of what we expected we would do when we sat down to go through all this. So I would ask if it's when it's germane at the time, that we, again, consider a resolution that we would send as an advisory board, as reflected in last month's minutes.
We'll get that put together for you.
David, what does that mean, we'll get it put together? So can we,
I'll have it next month for you.
okay.
Or can we do it in Section 8, under discussion and action?
Yeah, my concern, David, is that if we move this resolution from the subcommittee, and this is dealt with by the council next week, then that message is not going to be there in the kind of time.
Understand. Amanda, is that something we can do?
If the board would like to propose a motion under Section 8, discussion action on MAPS 3 programs, they could do that. They could also direct staff to bring that information to City Council at the time that the resolution for the sidewalk master plan is presented.
Great.
I would ask what the other, I think either way, as long as it's dealt with in the timely manner and not kind of after this council considers it, that's my concern.
Okay.
So I guess back to this sidewalk, MAPS 3 sidewalk master plan. I want you to know that the committee really has looked over this and talked about it and re-talked about it. And they did vote to approve it and bring it forward to you.
Anything you want to add?
No, I mean,
All right. Thank you.
Hey, David,
unless there's any other questions.
I think that I wasn't here last month, but I think both the subcommittee last month and probably the council too asked staff to look at other alternatives and sourcing opportunities and things. Has anything come up in that regard?
You mean as far as funding?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm restricted to how much funding we have in the MAPS program, and as Mr. Dover said, we'll send to council the request for additional funding.
So can you explain, I guess, what the MAPS use tax situation is, and if that's a possible source for something like that?
You know, I don't know that much about it. I may have to defer to Mr. Winger on that for some history.
Thank you, Board. I think in response to the question, the MAPS use tax for MAPS 3 has been designated by council for other purposes, and so it's part of the city's budget. So at least as it stands today, as we look at the current budget for the city and the city council, the funds that have come from that MAPS use tax have been designated for the upcoming year, but it is up to the council to decide what future collections, how they're designated. And so that hasn't been determined yet,
Could you explain?
possibly next year.
Could you explain to the folks what the use tax is and how it comes about?
And this began in MAPS 1, so this isn't something specific to MAPS 3. So use tax for the city of Oklahoma City, when we have a tax that is passed, the city has the option to also initiate a use tax. So it's very common, obviously, on sales taxes. Any sales of items within the city limits, the MAPS generates 1 cent interest or income that goes into the dedicated special purpose account for MAPS. And so that's the numbers that you have on your reports today. In addition to the sales tax, a use tax is collected. And what makes that different is these are goods that are purchased perhaps outside of the state, but used within the city of Oklahoma City, and a use tax is applied. So if somebody, say, I think the examples that we use, if there's some medical equipment perhaps that's not available in Oklahoma and it's purchased out of the state but brought into Oklahoma City for use, there is a use tax applied to that. That tax is collected by the tax commission, and then it's sent to the city of Oklahoma City and put into a separate account. But it's not the sales tax. And so it's treated separately. The council acts on it separately. And so currently, the MAPS 3 use tax is being used for other purposes. But it doesn't have to do with the $777 million that we've talked about as the MAPS 3 tax for the projects, the 8 different projects.
The $770 million comes from the sales tax.
Sales tax alone, and
That's all
that's
we
the
have really
projection.
to allocate, but there's a comparable 1 cent use tax collected on out-of-state purchases that I guess you're saying is discretionary for the council to
Well, the council decides, and it also does not generate $777 million. And so realize that it's only just for those items that are brought into and collected by the tax commission. So it's a much lower number. I don't have the projections of what that is, but it's significantly less.
I think it's running $1 million or $1.2 million a month or something along that line.
I'm sorry?
I think it's running about $1 million a month.
That's possible. I have not seen a report on that. But again, if you look at the council's designations, I believe some of those have been designated this year for additional safety items for the city. Public safety, police, fire, those types of issues have been addressed using the use tax to this point for this current year. Next year, when the budget's approved, they'll reassess that and possibly make different or same decisions.
So those are funds that could, at council's discretion, be used for additional sidewalks.
Completely up to the city council, yes.
Zane? Oh, Kimberly?
I was just going to say, in watching recent city council meetings, it's obvious that our opinions on wanting more sidewalks, Councilman Ryan has taken our opinion forward, and there was even great discussion this week as the city council received a MAPS update. So I know that sidewalks are prevalent on every single council person's mind, as well as our Department of Works, our city manager, and even up to our mayor. I recently watched a video on Mayor Mick Cornett's Facebook page where he regularly accepts questions from the public and answers them in a videotaped session that we can all enjoy. And one of the citizens in Oklahoma City specifically asked about sidewalks. And Mayor Cornett stressed that he agrees that, if we could put 300 miles of sidewalks in Oklahoma City, it would be great, and that even though the MAPS funding currently is not going to give us the 70 miles we originally had hoped for, that there are other ways to fund sidewalks, and that as this entire process goes on, the city will look at ways in order to expand that from this master plan. So I just found that very encouraging.
Zane?
I was just going to add that, the committee has worked very hard to try to come up with a priority list on how to determine which sidewalks go, and it wasn't proportioned out by individual wards. And I think that if we did that, we'd get to the point where we would have actually less effective use of sidewalks with MAPS 3, and there are other things that we can do with sidewalks, but I think we've done everything we could, and that the priority list that we've given is the best way to go. And with that, I would move that we accept the resolution.
It's been moved that we adopt the resolution. That's before us. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Further discussion? I wanted to just add this under discussion. I see our job as trying to put the council in a position to make a decision here. And we have the conundrum of we'd like to have more miles, but we don't have enough money. And that's all we can do is our job. I mean, we don't have more money. And so this is something that will have to be decided by the decision makers. But if we pass this, as the subcommittee has suggested that we do, we're validating the criteria, and the criteria do not include that list of criteria does not include equalizing it by wards.
Correct.
It is based on a need basis. So that's one of the things you'll be deciding. And the other one is the criteria does establish a priority list of much more than 70 miles, as Sue has already said. So as whatever funds are available, there will be more than 70 miles of opportunities to build sidewalks based on the criteria we have. And I feel like that's doing our job. And I'd like to see us move it forward as well to put them in a position to make the decisions that need to be made about it. Zane?
Sir, I'd just like to add to that is, MAPS 3 is not the end of sidewalks, just like it's not the end of transit, it's not the end of trails. We're going to expand beyond that. This is just all we can do with MAPS 3, and there are other ways of putting sidewalks in, and we're doing that throughout the city too. So I don't think it would be appropriate for us to take, at this point, start taking money out of the management reserve or anything like that to add to sidewalks when there may be other issues that become along later that are even more important than that. So I think this is the right way to go.
Anyone else?
I had one further comment in that I believe that moving this to the city council is also a good thing to do at this time, because it also gives the city a master plan for sidewalks so that the city can then use this to further grow without having to reinvest money in a consultant to do all of this review work again, and then our work is all consistent, whether it be through MAPS 3 or through other avenues the city has.
And I think it also should be recognized by us that if we do what Sue and Michael Dover suggested, they haven't sent it back to us, we looked at it and sent it back to them. I mean, we were expressing a view about the action that could be taken and the importance to which we attach to this. Okay? Well, the motion is before us. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion is adopted. Now, is there something additional, Sue and Mike Dover, that you all want to be considered as a separate item?
We'll do that in Section 8.
Will you do that in Section 8? Okay. All right, then. Then we have the next item on the agenda then is item 5, a resolution authorizing the negotiation for professional services. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is item 5, recommend resolution authorizing negotiation of professional services contract with Populous/GSB Incorporated for the MAPS 3 Convention Center Conceptual Study, Project M3C0003. This is a contract to authorize staff to negotiate the contract with the architect for the conceptual study of the convention center. This has gone through the standard selection procedures with Public Works, as many of you have said on that board before for various consultant selections with your subcommittees. There were 4 firms that were interviewed, 4 very capable firms. The committee decided that Populous GSB was the best firm for this job. What this contract will allow is for us to do better coordination with all the MAPS projects that we have, and also with the boulevard. So that includes the park, transit, as I said, the boulevard, and even Project 180 and all those, so that the talk about coordination can finally happen, so we get somebody on board for that. So like I said, it's conceptual studies and estimates only, and we'd ask that you approve this.
I guess I would say on behalf of the Convention Center Subcommittee that this comes with the unanimous endorsement of that committee. Under the process that we use, 2 members were designated as voting members. 2 members of that subcommittee were designated as voting members, Roy Williams and John Williams. I asked Mike Carrier from the Convention and Visitors Bureau to sit in on the interviews as well. All 3 of them participated in the process along with city staff. They reported to our subcommittee yesterday that they thought the process was good. They thought the proposals were outstanding. The choice of firms was world class. They thought the staff had done a great job getting the information together and they were very satisfied that the process had been duly followed and that every consideration had been given, and those people who on our subcommittee who participated in it joined in this recommendation. And so we bring it to you for your consideration with the unanimous endorsement of the committee. Is there a motion?
I move recommend.
It's been moved that we adopt this resolution. Is there a second? Second. It's been seconded. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted. Thank you. That brings us to item 6. This is listed in the agenda as an action item, but it will not be an action item today, and I'm going to ask David to start with the explanation and then give Mike Dover, who chairs that subcommittee, a chance to comment. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, as you said, was heard by the subcommittee. We had a great meeting, I thought. It was discussed very much, and the subcommittee basically decided they wanted to look at it a little more. There were some fine points that maybe we needed to revise on it, and we'll definitely see it next month. And I don't want to take everything from Mr. Dover.
Mike?
Not at all, but thank you, David. As some of you will, as most of you, hopefully all of you will recall, the first RFP that was sent out some months ago, we had 2 respondents, and for reasons that we have discussed regarding the financial capability of the operating costs, decided to reject both of those proposals, and that, of course, was with those applicants' agreement. What, as you said, David, what I was thrilled about was to see all of the potential, what we hope will be potential partners or applicants. It was probably just about a standing room only crowd yesterday, and I think what I really want to thank Nicole with ADG, who kind of led the effort to visit with many potential partners that we had decided might be a good fit as being involved with the senior wellness centers. And so visits were made with numerous folks, numerous agencies, and that list was presented yesterday. And many of those folks, again, were at that meeting. And we heard what they said, because this RFP that we're considering, that we probably will tweak a little bit, listened very carefully, and many of those thoughts that those potential applicants and partners had are included in this latest RFP. And I think that this process has just showed us that we don't, that because of what happened the first time, is that we're in no rush. And as David says, I expect and hope that at our October meeting, the subcommittee will approve the RFP, and we will take it bring it to this advisory board at that meeting, advisory board meeting, and hopefully shortly after the holidays, we'll have an applicant and a partner selected.
Questions? Mike?
Can you explain some of the changes in this RFP from the original RFP that have addressed some of the issues, I guess, that came up in the first round?
Well, I'd like to ask Nicole to come up and maybe discuss a little bit of that.
Welcome, Nicole.
Good morning. I brought this just in case you asked. There were several sort of common questions that we found that the interviewees came up with that we addressed in the new draft. Some of these questions still really maybe haven't been answered by the subcommittee, so they're still working on those. For example, who is the target population? Is it low income who maybe can't afford to pay, or is it maybe a market that can afford to pay? So there's some questions there still. Can there be a charge for membership? If so, how much? If not, then how do you have a revenue stream? So those are still some questions that are out there with potential applicants. The operational funding or lack thereof was a recurring theme, big concern, significant financial drain, particularly with the aquatic element. So that was a recurring concern of potential proposers. In the first RFP, the requirement for the city to have a property ownership interest, or an ownership interest in the property was there, wasn't really very clearly explained, and that's something that's not familiar to many of these groups. So we explained it further. Amanda provided us with many examples that could work, so those are included in the new RFP. So that just was really clarification. Came up a lot that transportation will be an issue, particularly with vulnerable populations. So there was a lot of discussion about some of the organizations actually have their own transportation network. Some discussed independent transportation networks or maybe a third party. So that's something that people are starting to think about wherever these end up. How do we get people there? The fact that there maybe be a bus service there was discussed that, seniors a lot of times are afraid to use the bus system, and maybe it's not as dependable as they would like, or maybe they don't feel secure, so that really wasn't necessarily an answer. Excuse me. The aquatic element came up again and again. Is it required? Does it have to be a full-size pool? Can it just be a therapy pool? Many of the groups that do work with seniors felt that it was intimidating, the labor and the time and cost-intensive, sort of element, but that it is something that the seniors maybe are expecting and really would utilize and could use, particularly like with a therapy pool. So the question at this time is it something that will be required? So these are all questions that the subcommittee are still trying to wrestle with a little bit. And then a lot of the potential respondents said, what do you want to know from us as far as outcomes? How do we know if we're successful with what you're looking for? So it was that kind of thing. And then the changes in the RFP from the first one to now, just to sort of summarize, I apologize, allergies are bad today for me. What we've included in the RFP that wasn't there before was that the proposers may request a subsidy if they have a detailed justification and explanation. That doesn't mean it will come, but if their proposal is, this is what we're able and willing to do, but we can only do it with X amount of subsidy, that's something that they can turn in at this time. Before in the RFP, it really wasn't listed that way. We've clarified, explained, and given examples again of the property interest requirement. There is definitely more latitude in this RFP for creative partnerships, and we've encouraged that. Many of the organizations are now talking to each other about how they can partner together and maybe carry a little bit of the load each and bring what their specialty or their expertise is. The evaluation criteria were slightly adjusted. Previously, we had financial capacity and business plan together. And as we thought through, we realized, someone may have excellent financial capacity and not have a good business plan. So those were adjusted and just sort of separated for those reasons. It's generally just easier to understand, clarified some bullets, put things in a little bit better order. And a really important point was everyone really said, we need more time this time. So we will definitely allow a much longer period of time from the time the RFP is released until there will be sort of a pre-proposal meeting after the RFP is released, and then a good chunk of time for them to get their partnerships and their proposal together. So those are sort of the main differences without going through the whole RFP. Is that helpful? Thanks.
Other questions? Bob?
Nicole, does the current RFP contemplate a single proposed partner who then might have, if you will, sub-partners, or can it be really a true collaboration?
It would have to be a common legal entity. So there would be, there can be a lead partner, but we do say that there would be someone who would apply, be a lead partner or a common legal entity that, and I know that some are looking at forming that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Well, just to retrace our steps, you'll remember that we've had one RFP approved. It went out. We had 2 responses. Neither one of those were acceptable to the subcommittee. And I'm viewing this as an effort to make it a more attractive opportunity for operating partners, which will be an essential element of us moving forward with the wellness center. So just generally all of the effort that they put into it is to make it a more attractive opportunity for someone and to get more people interested. So with that endeavor, we're not voting on it today. The subcommittee continues to look at it, but I can assure you they're working really hard and trying to make this, trying to get us moving forward on it. So congratulations, Mike, on you guys doing that. Anything else about item 6? All right, that moves us to item 7. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 7 is recommend resolution waiving the professional consultant selection procedures, designating the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation as the manager and operator of the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Whitewater Facility, Oklahoma River Racecourse starting systems and related appurtenances, and Oklahoma River Racecourse improvements, and directing staff to negotiate an agreement or agreements for related management and operation services with the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation. MAPS 3 program will be constructing a whitewater facility down by the river very shortly. We've also already provided the starting gates, and then there's some other equipment that we'll be providing. The city does not have the staff with the expertise to do these things, but somebody has to operate it. Somebody has to keep track and move them in and out and do these things. So because of the operations in the area, the Boathouse Foundation, we feel, is the best choice as operator of these things. Agreements still have to be made. This just authorizes us to go out and do those agreements, and you'll see those agreements as they come through. Note that it does waive the formal professional consultant selection procedures. We felt like the Boathouse Foundation was the right people to do this. And I want to note that this was also approved by the River Trust on Tuesday.
Michael Adams, you want to be heard on this?
No, I don't think I have any additional comments. I mean, I think the waiving of the normal process is, in this situation is appropriate because clearly the Boathouse Foundation already have their footprint down. They're already operating other facilities and with the River Trust more or less, managing that whole river thing. So I think it's clear that that's the right choice.
Any other questions? Mike Knopf is here if there's any specific questions about operational issues. And anyone else a question? All right then. Shall we recommend this resolution?
I move that we recommend the resolution.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that we adopt this resolution. All in favor say aye. Opposed no. It is adopted. I'm gonna backtrack for a moment to ask Amanda a question. Should we have on item 6 tabled that, or is just taking no action okay?
Because you took no action, you'll be treated as it was stricken from the agenda.
It's stricken from the agenda. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate it. All right. Item 8, discussion action on MAPS 3 program. This brings us then at least one item we know of. Sue and Mike, you want to be heard? Sue, you may start.
Well, I first would like to let you know that the Sidewalk and Trails Committee did pass a motion to request the council to construct 70 miles of sidewalk by using the rainy day or other funds. So that's the motion that's been brought forth by the Sidewalk and Trail Committee to council. So that's the motion that we passed unanimously.
All right. Same.
Just to clarify to me, does that mean that the subcommittee is recommending that the board pass this further to this, or are you going directly to the city council?
This is our motion to city council. I just want you to be aware that we passed that during our meeting yesterday. I would like to propose that as an advisory board that we send forth a motion.
Amanda, why don't you step to the podium again? I guess I'm thinking, Sue, that the subcommittee reports to us and they recommend to us, and that we recommend to the city. So why don't you enlighten us, Amanda?
Mr. Chairman, that's accurate. The subcommittee makes recommendations to the board. The board then can decide whether or not to recommend that on to council. So the motion that was made yesterday at the subcommittee was to ask city council to look for additional funding, whether it be through the rainy day fund or other funding sources, in order to provide the 70 miles of sidewalks that was proposed as part of MAPS 3. That recommendation can be made to this board, and if this board would like to also further that recommendation to City Council. The other option is that this board directs staff to include that information in the memo when the sidewalk master plan goes on to City Council, so that City Council is made aware of that information.
And that wouldn't be going forward this month, since we have not worked on it, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So that gets to the timeliness, I guess, of Michael Dover's.
Again, as I think I mentioned earlier, I think what's most important is that message be sent, and I'm okay with, however, what's the wisdom of the staff, is the best way to do
We'll make sure that's heard.
Yeah, there's no question, Mike, that the city council thinks this is an important project. And one of the reasons it was sent back, I think there was a general surprise and shock almost at the city council when we found out how little sidewalk we were going to get. And so I don't think there's we need to be reminded. I think it's on everybody's mind. The only problem is going to be finding the money, because if we have any additional money, there's going to be a lot of people applying for it or needing it. And so it's something we'll take very seriously as it goes forward, because I think we have an obligation to try as best we can to deliver what we promise the citizens. And clearly, the 70 miles of sidewalk was part of the motion when we had this vote. And I think the city council is very serious in trying to find a way to achieve that. And one of the reasons it was sent back to you all is because it was just such a surprise to us that we got so much, so little sidewalk for what the dollars were. So I think the council was well aware of your concern, and we share that concern.
Then is there,
What should we do?
Kim?
Do you feel that this delivery method of sending the information along with the report strongly reflects the passion that the Sidewalk Committee had for extending a message directly to council? Or do you feel we should recommend a resolution?
I think we should recommend a resolution.
With that, I have kind of penned something that I'd like to throw out there for discussion. That this board consider recommending a resolution to the City Council that they both receive and approve the sidewalk master plan based on the needs criteria established and vetted through both the consultants and the subcommittee. Further, as it is evident that the MAPS 3 sales tax funds cannot fund the entire 70 miles anticipated, the advisory board requests that City Council begin to investigate how other funds and revenue available, including grants, could be used to further fund more sidewalks under MAPS 3.
I would second that motion.
Right. I didn't hear anything about 70 miles, but so it's broader than that, right? Whereas the recommendation from the subcommittee specifically mentioned. So I just want to make sure I heard it right.
I said that, I did say at one point that it's evident that the MAPS 3 sales tax funds cannot fund the entire 70 miles anticipated.
Good. I just didn't hear that. Thank you.
Just as a point of clarification, Ms. Lowe, was that your motion?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay.
And Michael Dover has seconded that motion. Is there further discussion? Mike Adams?
I guess the first part of it was approving the report, which I think we've already done, haven't we?
That was the resolution we've already passed, I think.
The first part of your motion. So is that now a new one or an addendum to, or?
No, the resolution is already recommended by this group for the master plan. This motion would be separate, and how I understood it is just recognizing that the sidewalk master plan is received by council.
Okay. So, all right. Further discussion, further questions? All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion and the resolution are adopted. Thank you, Kim, for your help on that. Anything else under item 8, discussion action items on the MAPS 3 program? All right, that brings us to the item 9, the subcommittee reports. Let's see, we did not have a meeting of the Park Committee. Cam, is there anything that you wanted to add, even though your committee didn't meet this month?
I would. Thank you, Chairman. Our subcommittee last met in August and listened to Hargraves talk about the schedule of events that was going to happen over the last few months. During September, Hargraves was in Oklahoma City having focus group meetings and special interest group meetings, which went very well. It's obvious that Hargraves is going to engage every single entity in this city and every project in MAPS to make sure that the parks are quite a successful project. We had a meeting, a public meeting, first one held at the library on the 27th of August, which was very well received by the public. There were some great comments. A survey was published, which everyone can find online at okc.gov/MAPS3. You can also friend the MAPS3 Facebook page to get alerts about that, and we're going to be gathering data on those surveys, which Hargraves will then compile and present at the next public meeting, which will be held on October 25th.
Thank you. Any questions for Kim? Bob, I know the Fairgrounds Subcommittee did not meet this month. Anything that you would like to report to us about that?
Just to give you a quick update, that the process of selecting architect and engineer to do the initial planning on the exposition building, the proposals have been received, those are being reviewed, and I'm not sure, David, if interviews have been scheduled yet, but that'll be coming up fairly shortly to select those after the interview.
That's correct.
Thank you. The transit modern streetcar, Zane, you have a report you want to give?
Yes,
today?
we met yesterday afternoon. We had a very good, nice presentation by Mr. Mike Knopt of the Boathouse District. And the significance being that the Boathouse area and the future Whitewater Park are kind of isolated from the rest of downtown and the Bricktown area. And what we were specifically listening for was plans for future transportation to get individuals in the community to those venues. And it became quite apparent that while it's not within the reach of the MAPS3 Transit Modern Streetcar Subcommittee, any future expansions of that system should take the Boathouse District as a high priority. The rest of the meeting was spent with a number of discussions on operations and maintenance costs and facilities. No resolutions, just discussions. We also had a discussion about providing a brief summary of the Oklahoma City Modern Streetcar Transit plan or program to a convention or a vendors convention that's being held out west, and we're going to recommend that the city council, or not the city council, but city staff take a look at the statement that was prepared and possibly include that in their brochure about the status of what Oklahoma City is doing with the streetcar system. That was about it.
Any questions for Zane? Sue, anything else from trails or sidewalks other than the action items we've seen? All right. Anything else from River, Mike?
No, our meeting was pretty short. We had discussed the issue that we acted on today regarding the Boathouse Foundation being the operator down there.
You got something really big going on down there this weekend, don't you?
There is the regatta, which is the Boathouse's main event, is, I guess, today, tomorrow, and Saturday. And I think there's a lot of activity. Mike snuck out. He knows a lot more about it than I do, but I think there's a lot of collegiate teams from across the U.S. I think, gosh, I don't remember how many you said, 30 or 40. I thought there's more than that. But anyway, a number of them from Harvard and Stanford, and as well as some of the local teams competing. And I think that's Saturday, but I think Thursday and Friday there have been a lot of community-oriented events, dragon boat racing. I think he said there's 50-some corporate teams that are involved at the Boathouse that are doing events. youth programs and things. So he's got a lot of things going on. There's the Blue Party one night this week and various other things. So if you get a chance to get down there, there's a lot of activities going on this weekend. It's kind of the premier local event of the year, I think.
Thank you. Mike Dover, anything else that from your committee? And nothing else from the Convention Center Committee. So that completes the subcommittee reports. David, you have an informational item under item 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the map for the Upper Park land acquisition that you've seen before. Right now, we're roughly 90-95% on acquisition of properties. You can see that all we lack are the 3 parcels at the northern edge of the park, and those are still being actively pursued.
Great. Any questions? It's getting really blue.
It is.
Getting really
Blue is
blue.
good.
Yeah. Okay. No questions there then. David, have we overlooked anything that you want to advise us about under item 11, your update?
I can hit a few more high points, Mr. Chairman. As we discussed on senior health and wellness, the work continues on the operating partner RFP. At the river, work continues on the race course lighting project that we have out there. Design continues on the whitewater course, and interviews will be held on October 10th for the consultant selection for Phase 2 improvements. At the fairgrounds, work continues on the master plan study, and the first plans for the fairgrounds projects, which were the grading plans for where the racetrack was, those were approved by City Council this past Tuesday, so those are on the street. Transit work will soon begin on verification of preferred route, and an offer has been made on the intermodal hub. Park, as Ms. Lowe said, work continues with the master plan, and the meetings were held September 13th. A great week of meetings, I thought. And as we just saw, land acquisition continues up on the Upper Park. Trails and sidewalks, work continues on Phase 1 of the River Trail. Our consultants are working hard trying to get final plans done for the trail out there. And then Convention Center, as we discussed in the item on the agenda today, the architect hopefully will be engaged soon to allow for coordination of the meetings for all the projects. That's all I have.
Any questions for David? All right, that brings us to item 12, comments by the board. Anyone have anything that we have not discussed so far?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
It has a somewhat relationship to what we discussed before, but I would like just to tell the citizens of Oklahoma City who are watching this production on television how lucky they are to have the kind of dedicated, intelligent people that we have put together for this board and for all the subcommittees. They are really getting good service from their citizens, and they ought to feel that their interests are being well represented here. And I just want to thank you all for the commitment you've made to serving on this function. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilman Ryan. That means a lot to all of us, and I want to add this one other word of encouragement. We have known from the beginning that this is a multi-year process. The plans were made in 2009. We're going to be executing them from 2012 to 2021. Are there going to be some problems? Are there going to be some costs that we hadn't anticipated? Are there going to be some bumps in the road? Well, of course there are. And the solution is the process that's been created. And I feel great about the job you all are doing in these subcommittees, seeing the work that's being done. As Councilman Ryan has already said, the commitment of the citizens of Oklahoma City to this project is really inspirational. And I really commend all of you for working hard in these subcommittees and being faithful to the task. We've got a long way to go, but we're off to a great start. And so don't be discouraged by the bumps in the road. There'll be more. We just got to keep doing our job. And so thanks to each one of you for the commitment that you've made to this. David, any more comments from staff?
No, sir.
All right. And then citizens, anyone here today that would like to be heard by the Citizens Advisory Board? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? It's been Moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned. Thank you.